The Black Legion Forgefiend, a terrifying and hulking demonic engine, fusing a horrifying blend of demon and machine, forged by the Dark Mechanicum tech priests for brutal close-quarters combat. They serve as a monstrous siege breaker or battering ram for traitor legions, particularly the Black Legion, known for their powerful, relentless, and savage assault, which is fueled by its trapped demon rage.
Brothers and sisters of the Warhammer universe, welcome back to Tortuga's Grim Rosaline. My name is Jeff, and today I'm going to show you how I paint a Grimdark Black Legion Forgefiend. This is actually my second part of my year-end 2025 diorama. And I want to just say thank you to everybody who subscribed and watched all of my previous videos of this year in memorializing our beloved Rosaline. And starting off with 2026 is our CHAOS WarpLord Titan, which I'm very excited to start putting out those videos for you all to see and join me in that progress. But before we get to all of that, I need you to do all those YouTube thingies that you do so well. Down below, click on the like, share, subscribe, and now that that's out of the way, let's do this.
So here's a list of all the paints that we'll be using on this build. I've already primed my Forgefiend with Vallejo's Primer Black and done a base coating with Vallejo's True Metallic Metal Obsidian Black. So now we're going to be starting off with Ushabit, and I'm going to be using this in my airbrush and doing this to paint all of the flesh areas on the Forgefiend. And if you don't have an airbrush, you can go ahead and use paint or dry brush or however you feel comfortable. I just like doing my flesh areas with my airbrush to make it as clean as possible. And don't worry if you're using an airbrush or painting, if you go over the areas into the armor, that's going to be totally fine. The trim will cover up any blemishes, and if it goes even farther than that, we can easily paint over with the base paint. Next, I'm going to be using Reikland Fleshshade in my airbrush. And again, I'm going to go over all of the flesh areas with this on the Forgefie. We're going to do light passes over each of the areas. And what this is going to do is this is going to help bring out all of the definition and texture and all of the flesh areas of this. And we can do multiple passes on any area that we want the skin to look even darker, like it's in a shadow. And you might notice that I'm using an acrylic shading over my normal oil washes, and that's primarily because I'm using it via my airbrush. Any other time, I would always go for an oil wash. Next, I'm going to be using Berserker Bloodshade via my airbrush. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to use this to go over all of the edges of the flesh that would be meeting towards the shield plating, pipes, pistons, anything along that line. This is what's going to be the base setup of any type of skin irritation. My goal throughout all this is to kind of show the agony of the flesh as it's being demonically merged with the machinery. We're next going to be using one of my new favorite things to use on flesh, and that's Villainy Ink's Caput Mortuum. Caput Mortuum is perfect for weathering and aging flesh, giving it a sense of decay and grime. It gives a nice, sickly and bruised look. And being an enamel, it goes into all of the definition nooks and cranny areas and really brings them out even more. And feel free to be generous with that Caput Mortuum, because being an enamel, we can always go back through with a Q-tip and we can start rubbing off any area that looks too saturated or too dark that we're not happy with. And once we finished applying the Caput Mortuum, we're going to use a hairdryer. We're going to use that to do two things. One, it makes the drying process faster, but two, it takes off a satin effect and gives it more of a matte effect that we want for this skin. So now that we've finished all of our shading and texturing, we're going to go back and bring out the highlights in the skin. And to do this, we're going to be using ABT 502's Dust. So this being an oil paint, you only need a very little bit on the tip of your brush, and you're going to apply this onto the areas of the flesh that you want to bring the highlights back out on. Now me, I do a 2-brush system. I will do the first part with the oil, then I'll take a clean brush to blend that oil paint in with the regular flesh. And being an oil paint, you have a lot of time to play around and blend in to get it to look exactly how you want. That's what I love about oil paints. Last for the skin is we're going to use Villainy Ink's Carrion Crimson, and we're going to use this around any of the flesh that meets the armor plates, metallics, pipes, pistons, or anything else. This is going to really help bring out that flesh irritation and almost oozing blood type of look that we're looking for, especially with the granules that are in this enamel. And we are definitely not going to use a hairdryer on this. We want this to have that rich satin look to help bring out the irritation effect. Next up is Vallejo's True Metallic Metal Imperial Gold. And with that, it is now every Chaos Painter's favorite time. And by favorite, I probably mean most hated. It is the dreaded Chaos Trim. So we're going to be doing 2 thin coats of the Imperial Gold over all of the trim on this Forgefie. And yes, there is a good amount of it on this bad boy. So this is my first project using Vallejo's new paint line of True Metallic Metal paints. And so far, I am loving them. I think they have great, rich colors, but we still want to definitely do 2 thin coats on everything to really bring that color out and make it pop. And of course, while doing these coats, if at any point you accidentally go over the trim back onto the regular armor, don't worry about it. We're going to touch it up later with the base paints. Next, we're going to use Vallejo's True Metallic Metal Sterling Silver. So we're going to use the sterling silver to paint all the metallics on the Forgefie. And don't worry, you might think right off the bat that this is a pretty bright and standing out type of silverish color. It's going to look awesome when we get done with the shading and the enamels. And being a metallic, you already know what I'm going to say. We're always going to do 2 thin coats of this. That way it's going to look rich and great and have no blotches. Next, we're going to use Vallejo's True Metallic Metal Ancient Copper. So we're going to use the Ancient Copper on the exhaust pipes on the back of the Forgefie, the piston couplings, the burrs on the tip of the tentacles as well as the tongue, and any of the cable areas on the back of the tail area. As well as if you decide to put some out just to kind of make it stand a little bit more, go for it. So I'm not going to lie to you here. Being the first project that I used any of these Vallejo's True Metallic Metal paints, the copper kind of caught me off guard based on all the other Vallejo copper colors. It came off as a very bright, rich, orangish copper instead of the regular metallic look that I was used to. Even though it caught me off guard, I think I still really made this look really good on the project once finished. But if you want to use a different version of copper, go right ahead. Next up is Vallejo's Bone White. So we're going to be using the Bone White to paint the fangs and teeth off the Forgefie, as well as any of the horns that you see coming off of the head, the jawline, and coming up from any other parts of the body. And like always, whenever doing any type of white or cream, we're always going to do 2 thin coats and possibly a third. We want this to be a nice, rich color and not have any blotches in it that some of these whites and creams often do have. And with a quick once over, we can see that our Forgefie is coming along quite nicely. Next is going to be Vallejo's Model Color White, and we're going to use this as a base color. We're going to paint the eyes and the under vents on the chest. And we're doing this to help create a glowing effect that we're going to be doing later on. Next is Vallejo's True Metallic Metal Ancient Copper Shade, and this is something that I'm doing on my own since I started with that metallic ancient copper color. If you use a different copper, you don't have to do this step. This is me trying to darken this before we get into the shades and enamels. So we're going to use this over any area that we did the ancient copper earlier, and just make sure you're not going overly generous with this type of wash. We don't want pooling to take effect. Next is going to be Citadel's Dark Reaper, and we're going to use this to paint all of the cabling on the Forgefie, under the head, through the neck area, all the way down the belly, and through the tail. I really love this blue-gray color. I use it on almost all of my chaos paint jobs. It gives a nice separation from the regular black and gold areas without standing out too much to distract from the rest of the piece. Next, we're going to use Citadel Baal Red, and we're going to use this over all of the areas that we use the white, the vents on the chest, as well as the eyes on the Forgefiend head. And feel free to go over those areas a little bit with that red to really bring out that glowing effect. And with all of our base colors done, we can take another look at our Forgefiend, and yeah, he is definitely looking brutal. Up next is Winsor & Newton's Lamp Black. I'll be using this with mineral spirits to make my oil wash version of Milne Oil Shade. So we're going to be applying this wash to all the metallic areas on the Forgefiend. Basically the metal cables, the pipes, the pistons, the claws, fangs, the tentacles, even the metallic tongue area. This is going to do a couple different things. One, this is going to darken that already bright metallic that we have, but two, and more importantly, the oils go into all the nooks and crannies to really bring out those definitions. And don't worry, seeing that this is an oil, if any of the areas look too saturated, we can take a Q-tip and follow through back over those areas to either remove some of that oil or push it to other areas. Next is Winsor & Newton's Burnt Sienna and Lamp Black. This is my oil wash version of Argax Earthshade. So we're going to be applying this to all of the gold trim as well as all of the black armor to really bring out a nice rich hue to both. And again, we can be as generous as we want with this because we can always follow back through with a Q-tip to remove any areas that look too saturated or push them to other areas. Up next is Villainy Ink's Goon's Grime, and this is my favorite go-to for anything I'm doing that is grimdark. I'm going to be applying this to all of the bones, the black armor, the gold trim, the copper, pretty much anything that isn't the flesh or regular metallics. However, I will be applying this to some of the metallic cabling off of the tail just to give it that nice greenish brown hue. One of the reasons why this is one of my go-tos for anything I do with grimdark is the way that this enamel dries. The greenish brown look looks awesome on pretty much any color scheme we go through on here, as well as the texture elements that make it just look like filth dried onto your miniature. And with that being said, we're going to use a hairdryer to dry this enamel even faster. The reason being is this is going to give it even grittier matte look instead of letting it dry regular with a gloss finish. And even after drying with a hairdryer, we can always go back with a Q-tip like we're doing here to kind of rub off any areas that are possibly oversaturated or in any areas that we want to maybe bring those undercolors back up. These are just one of the reasons why I can't recommend enough getting into using enamels and oils when you're doing your miniatures. They're so forgiving, so easy to work with, and just work amazing as blending tools. Next, we're going to be using Villainy Ink Ex Machina, and this is pretty much my favorite rust effect. We're going to be using this to go over all of the metallics in certain areas to really kind of give that rusty, worn, weathered effect on this Forgefiend. This is Villainy Ink's second rust enamel, and actually was their original blend way back when they first started. I love this color. Some people might not as much. I think it's much more bold and stands out, especially when doing dark colors. And normally I would add this to the corners of the black armor anywhere that meets the trim, but because I want this Forgefiend to stand out from the other piece I'm combining this with, I'm not putting it on there. And again, we're going to be using a hairdryer to dry this faster. What this is going to do is it's going to bring that rust effect and really enhance the corrosion look to it. Up next is Villainy Ink's Coelia Green. We're going to be applying this to all of the copper areas on the Forgefiend. This is going to bring out a really amazing looking oxidation effect. And again, we're going to be using this with the hairdryer to really bring that effect out. And now we're on to the highlight area, and we're going to start this off with Vallejo's Model Air Chrome. We're going to be using the chrome to highlight all of the metallic areas on the Forgefiend, and especially on any of the motion parts of the metallics, kind of like the piston shafts that are constantly being moved back and forth. Those would have a much shinier, bright aspect to it, so we definitely want to add those there. And with highlighting, always try to look to where you would see a light hitting from somewhere above, and where is that light touching first? That's where you want to apply the highlights to those areas. Up next is Green Stuff World Antique Gold Chrome Metal. So we're going to be using this to bring out the highlights and all of the gold trim on the Forgefiend, including any of the spikes off the back of the Forgefiend. As well as I always like to try to put this on each of the rivet heads on the gold trim just to give that nice little color look. And the last highlight we're going to be doing is with Vallejo's Model Air Copper. So we're going to be using this to highlight all of the exhaust pipes, the spear tips on the tentacles and the tongue, and any of the other areas along the Forgefiend's body that we put copper on to give it a nice little standout. And with the exhaust pipes, we're going to be using this not just only for highlighting, but we're going to start to bring out again some of that definition from the corrosion and oxidation effects that we put on earlier. And there you have it, a Grimdark Black Legion Forgefiend. A demonic mechanical beast, so brutal and savage that even your dreams would be scared to include that in them. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that maybe I gave you an idea or two that you might be able to use in one of your own future builds. And like I always say, Grim for the Grim Rosaline.